this is the first lesson in the Year 8 HTML and CSS unit. Now what we'll have a look at is we will review our understanding of HTML. We will also look at the limitations of HTML, and we'll introduce a new language called CSS. We'll understand what it is and how it can improve the presentation of a web page. So what is HTML? Well, from the previous unit that we did, we should have understood that HTML basically instructs the browser how to display text and images on a web page. So for example, the code will tell the browser how the text should be bold and to the center. Perhaps that a line could be displayed across the screen. And then the browser would go, yep, no problem, and display the content exactly how the code dictates. Let's have a little look at a bit of HTML just to really remind us of how it all works. Okay, so here we are in an HTML IDE, and on the left hand side you can see that we've got some code, and on the right hand side we've got the web page. Now at the moment the web page is blank, and the code structure is such that we've got an HTML opening tag and an HTML closing tag here, which just tells the browser that what's in between is going to be HTML code. And then we've got our head tags and we've got our body tags. Now anything that we want to display on the page itself should go between the body tags, and we have other tags that will change the look of text and allow us to add images and so on. Now if I was to write an H1 tag, and I would say something like this is a heading. If I then closed my heading tag, notice that we always have a / in our closing tag. If I run that code, you can see that the text is big and bold. I could just show you that without those heading tags, the text would then become small and unformatted. So heading tags definitely tell the browser how text should be displayed, and it should be displayed big and bold. Now there are other tags that we could apply to change the look of this text. I could use a center tag, for example. Notice the American spelling. That would display it in the center of the screen, center of the page. I could then, notice that I've made a little mistake there. There we go. I could add a horizontal rule using an HR tag. And in the body tag itself, I could select a color for the background. BG color equals, I could go aqua, and that will turn it blue. And then I could just have a normal paragraph tag that I could, if I wanted to, align to the center. Again, notice the American spelling. This is some text for my page. Let's do a closing paragraph tag. And if I run that code, you can see the text is now in the center. And if I wanted to, I could surround that further with a font tag, and I could set the face to be something like Century Gothic. That would set the font style of the text to Century Gothic. I could have the size being set to 10, and I could have the color, again notice the American spelling, perhaps set to yellow. And then I could close my font tag like so. And if I run the code, you can see that the text has now been formatted as it described by the HTML tag that I've added in here. So that's a quick reminder of HTML. Now HTML is only one of a few languages that is used to build web pages and websites. But there are three main languages that we will look at. HTML, we've just seen. CSS is what's going to be introduced in this unit, and JavaScript. Now the differences between these are that HTML is very good at sort of building the structure of a web page. CSS is very good at improving the presentation of the page. So HTML, you add content, you add pictures, you add text, but CSS can improve the presentation in a much more global way. And then JavaScript often brings your web pages to life. And we'll have a look at that in the Year 9 unit. So if you were to think of a standard web page, HTML might be used to write some text and display the text in a certain location. CSS might be then used to choose a font and a color. Now we have already seen how HTML you can choose fonts and colors, but often CSS will bring a web page presentation to a much higher level of professionalism. And JavaScript or jQuery would then bring the web page to life, make it interactive. For example, here you can see that we've got a little drop down calendar that would have been coded with JavaScript. Okay, so what is CSS? CSS is cascading style sheets. And if you had a web page that was written in HTML, it might be fairly straightforward, bit of text, a line perhaps. And then if you wanted to improve the presentation, you could add some CSS and it could change the background color, could format the text, add a border, and so on. So we'll have a look at some examples of how CSS is used to develop the presentation of a web page now. So here we are back at our web page that we saw earlier. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove a few of these tags. So now we're left with a very basic web page where we have a heading, we have some text, and we have a horizontal rule. And we're going to try and style the page, improve the presentation using some CSS. Now to begin with, we need to recognize that CSS code will go between the head tags, because the code itself we don't want to appear on the screen, we don't want it to be on the page, it's not really the content, it's background information about the web page. So we place it between the heading tags. And inside the heading tags, we actually place them between style tags. So now let's look to add some CSS code that's going to improve the presentation of some HTML elements. So to begin with, let's try and change the look of the heading. So I'm going to write H1 because I'm going to apply this CSS code to all heading tags, H1 tags that I use. And I'm going to use curly brackets to open up the area where I can add some properties and attributes in terms of improving the presentation of this heading tag. I'm going to begin by saying that I want to align this heading, all heading tags to the center. So I'm going to write text align colon center semicolon. If I run that code, you can see that the text has now been centered. I could change the size of the text by going font size, and I could say 10 pixels, and that's made it too small. If I change it to 50 pixels, that's made it much larger. I could change the color, colon, red, and that changes the color of the heading. And I could change the font style by writing font family, and let's change the font to Kristen ITC. You can see that the font has changed. Now I could apply similar code to all paragraph tags in the same way. In fact, let's copy this code, let's paste it down here, and let's change the font size to 30 pixels. Let's change the color to blue, and let's make the text align to the left. So here you can see how CSS code can be applied to heading tags. Now you might be thinking, well, why didn't we just use font tags to make these changes, for example? But one benefit of doing all of the changes in CSS code means that you can apply these changes globally, so that if I was to add another heading tag, it would take on the same changes. For example, this is another heading. I don't need to add any more code, and it will still style it in the same way. Likewise, if I was to add another paragraph tag. This is some more text. Again, this code here will be applied to that second paragraph tag. So it's a way of globally setting the look of your page, formatting text in this example from a central place. But obviously if we add more images and we add colors to the background, these can all be done from the style sheet up here, from this CSS code. So that if down the line we want to change the color of all the text and we want to make headings larger or change the fonts of all headings, we can do it from one central place, from a global position, which can save us a lot of time, and it's a lot more efficient doing it this way. So although that was just a very brief introduction, hopefully you've got a little bit more understanding now about this new language, CSS, that we can apply to our web pages, HTML tags, so that we can make global changes to the presentation and the look of our web pages.